"Uncle, he said he's going to bury me in the backyard like he did my cat," a 6-year-old homeless girl tells Millionaire while pointing at a man. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel. To support my work, your help is very important. The harsh midday sun beat down on the dusty streets of Harmony Creek when Benedict Thompson, 58, parked his silver pickup truck in front of the rusty gate of the old pecan farm. 20 years, 2 whole decades had passed since he last set foot on that red dirt that was once the pride of the Thompson family. Now, wearing a white dress shirt already stained with sweat and linen pants wrinkled from the 3-hour drive. From Charleston, he observed the property with a mixture of nostalgia and irritation. The farm was in ruins. The 2-story colonial mansion, which once impressed visitors with its blue shutters and wide verandas, now showed peeling paint and a roof with several broken tiles. Weeds had overtaken what was once a carefully planned garden by his mother, and the pecan trees, without proper care, grew wildly among the thistles. Benedict sighed, running a hand through his neatly combed grey hair. As a successful businessman in Charleston, owner of 3 hardware stores and a small commercial center, he was used to solving problems efficiently and coldly. But this inheritance was different. Every corner of that place brought back memories of a time he preferred to forget, of a family that slowly disintegrated, leaving only him as a survivor of a once prosperous lineage. He took the papers from the leather briefcase he always carried with him, inheritance documents, deeds, property blueprints, everything meticulously organized in transparent folders, as was his custom. Benedict Thompson left nothing to chance. In the last 5 years, since he lost his wife Margaret in a car accident, this obsessive need for control had intensified even further. It was as if organizing every detail of life could somehow prevent other tragedies from surprising him. He was focused on the documents when he heard shouts coming from the dirt road that led to downtown. A desperate child's voice cut through the hot afternoon air. He looked up and saw a scene that made him momentarily forget all the papers in his hands. A small girl ran towards him, her bare feet kicking up clouds of red dust. Her brown hair was tangled and dirty. Her clothes, a faded blue dress that was already too big for her, were torn in several places. But what caught Benedict's attention most were her eyes, brown, large, shining with a mixture of terror and determination that didn't match her apparent 6 years of age. "Uncle! Uncle!" she cried, pointing behind her with thin little hands. "He said he's going to bury me in the backyard like he did my cat." Before Benedict could fully process what was happening, the girl clung to his legs with surprising strength. Her small body trembled, but she didn't cry. There was something in that gaze that conveyed a wounded courage, as if she had already faced too much for a child her age. It was then that Benedict saw the man pursuing her. Thin, of medium height, appearing to be in his early 40s, he walked with long, determined strides towards them. He wore a sweat-stained black t-shirt and faded jeans. His small, dark eyes gleamed with a rage that made Benedict instinctively position himself between the child and the approaching man. "Isadora, get back home right now!" the man bellowed, his harsh voice echoing down the empty road. "How many times have I told you not to mess with strangers?" The girl tightened her grip on Benedict's legs, burying her face in his linen pants. He could feel the child's fear, but also realized she had no intention of letting go. "Walter Jenkins," the man said, extending a dirty hand to Benedict, who didn't shake it. "I'm her stepfather. I apologize for the trouble, but the girl sometimes gets a little problematic." Benedict observed Walter carefully. There was something deeply disturbing about that man. Not just his disheveled appearance or the smell of alcohol that emanated even at midday, but especially the way he spoke about the child, as if she were an inconvenient object. "She said you threatened to bury her," Benedict said, his voice low, but firm. Years of running businesses had taught him to identify dangerous people, and all his instincts were on high alert. Walter laughed, an unpleasant sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, that! Her cat died last week, right? So she gets these fantasies. Kids are like that, they make up a lot of stuff." "It's not true!" Isadora's muffled voice came from behind. "Benedict's legs. He killed Mittens, and he said if I told anyone he'd do the same to me." The silence that followed was heavy. Benedict felt something tighten in his chest, a mixture of anger and protectiveness he hadn't felt in a long time. In the last 5 years, since Margaret's loss, he had emotionally shut down, resolving everything with money and detachment. But that child clinging to his legs was awakening something he thought he had lost forever. "Look here," Walter said, taking a threatening step towards them. "The girl is my responsibility. She's coming with me now, and you'd better not meddle where you're not called." Benedict pulled his wallet from his back pants pocket, a movement that made Walter stop immediately and break into an interested smile. "How much?" Benedict asked, getting straight to the point. "What do you mean?" "How much to leave her alone? For a few hours?" Walter's eyes gleamed with greed. "Well, if you want to play protector, $50 should do it for her to stay here until sunset." Benedict took a $100 bill from his wallet and extended it to Walter, who snatched it quickly. "And she stays until tomorrow morning," Benedict said, his voice brooking no argument. Walter examined the bill carefully, bit one of the corners to test if it was real, and then smiled that cynical smile again. "Deal. But don't get too used to her, you hear? Isadora is my girl, and I always get what's mine back." With these threatening words, Walter turned his back and began walking back down the dusty road, whistling an off-key tune. Benedict watched him until he disappeared behind a bend, and only then looked down at the girl who was still clinging to his legs. "You can let go now," he said, his voice softer. "He's gone." Isadora looked up, revealing tears that had finally begun to flow, but her eyes held that impressive determination. "Thank you, Uncle," she said in a small but firm voice. "You saved my life." Benedict felt something stir within his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in a long time. He looked at the girl, too thin, dirty, clearly mistreated, and for the first time in 5 years, his obsessive need to control everything around him found a purpose that went beyond his own fears. But as he watched Isadora try to tidy her tangled hair with trembling little hands, a disturbing question began to form in his mind. What exactly had happened to her cat? And more importantly, what else was Walter Jenkins capable of? Benedict watched Isadora for a few seconds, noting how she tried to compose herself after the scare. The girl wiped her face with the back of her dirty hands, leaving streaks of dirt mixed with tears on her thin cheeks. There was a dignity in that gesture that deeply impressed him. "Are you hungry?" he asked, putting his wallet back in his pocket. Isadora's eyes lit up, but she hesitated before answering. "A little," she said softly, as if being hungry was a source of shame. Benedict looked around. The farm was isolated, far from Harmony Creek town center, and he hadn't brought food with him, but he remembered a small general store on the main road, about a 15-minute walk away. "Come with me," he said, extending his hand to her. "Let's get you something to eat." Isadora looked at the outstretched hand with a cautious expression. It was evident she wasn't used to gestures of kindness. After a few seconds, she lightly touched Benedict's fingers with her own, small and calloused. During the walk along the dirt road, Isadora stayed half a step behind Benedict, as if ready to flee at any moment. He noticed she limped slightly on her left leg and that her bare feet had several small wounds. "How long have you lived in Harmony Creek?" he asked, trying to start a conversation. 3 months, she replied, kicking a small stone ahead. "We came from Charleston. Mum said it would be better here, that Walter had promised her a good job." "And what does your mother do?" "She cleans houses. She leaves early in the morning and only comes back when it's dark." Isadora suddenly stopped and looked at Benedict with those big, serious eyes. "Mom is good. It's not her fault what Walter does." Her defending her mother with such determination touched Benedict in an unexpected way. He remembered Margaret, how she always defended the people she loved, even when they didn't deserve it. Mr. Anderson's general store was in a simple brick house with a faded sign hanging on the door. The owner, a short, chubby man in his 60s, greeted Benedict with obvious curiosity. "Good afternoon. You're not from around here, are you?" "I'm Benedict Thompson. I came to handle matters at my family's old farm." Mr. Anderson's eyes widened. "Ah, you're the son of the late John Thompson. Boy, it's been a long time since I've seen anyone from your family around here. The farm's a bit abandoned, isn't it?" "It is," Benedict agreed, avoiding elaborating on the subject. "I wanted to buy a few things." Isadora was delighted by the variety of products on the shelves. Benedict bought bread, ham, cheese, some fruits, and a soda. He noticed how the girl's eyes fixed on each item he put in the bag, as if she were memorizing a treasure. "Is the girl your granddaughter?" Mr. Anderson asked, as he calculated the total on the old cash register. "She's a little friend," Benedict replied, hesitant. "Oh, she's Clara's daughter," the shopkeeper said, looking at Isadora with sympathy. "Smart girl, that one. Always polite when she comes. Here with her mother. But it's a shame." "A shame why?" Mr. Anderson's face turned serious. "That man who lives with them, Walter. He's not a good person, sir. I've heard things. He messes with bad people." Benedict felt a tightening in his stomach. "What kind of things?" Mr. Anderson looked around, making sure no one else was in the store, and lowered his voice. "They say he collects protection money from families who come here looking for work. He promises to help, but then it's hard to get rid of him." The shopkeeper's words echoed in Benedict's mind as he and Isadora returned to the farm. The girl was carrying an apple he had peeled for her, eating slowly, as if she wanted to make it last as long as possible. They sat on the porch of the abandoned house, on the wooden steps that creaked under their weight. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the neglected pecan trees. Isadora ate the sandwich Benedict prepared for her, with a hunger that broke his heart. "Isadora," he said after she finished eating, "tell me about your cat." The girl's face immediately closed off. She hugged her knees, shrinking into herself. "Mittens was orange," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I found him when he was very small, abandoned near the trash. Mom let me keep him, even though Walter didn't like it. And what happened to him?" Isadora was silent for a long time, looking at the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. "One night I woke up with Mittens meowing very loudly, as if he was in pain. When I went to check, Walter was in the backyard. Her voice faltered. Benedict felt his hands clench into fists. "You don't have to continue if you don't want to." "He said cats bring bad luck, that they bring bad spirits into the house. But I know it's not true. He killed Mittens just because he could, because no one would stop him." Tears returned to Isadora's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "And when you were sad, he made the threat?" "Not just when I was sad. Walter always says these things. He says kids who cause trouble disappear like unwanted animals. Mom always tells me not to provoke him, to be quiet and obey everything." Benedict felt a rage building inside him, an emotion he hadn't experienced with such intensity in a long time. In recent years, after Margaret's death, he had become cold, calculating, solving problems only with logic and money. But that child was awakening something primitive in him, a protective instinct he didn't know he still possessed. "Does your mother know about the threats?" "Mom is afraid of him too," Isadora admitted. "Sometimes when he leaves, she cries in the bathroom. She thinks I don't see, but I do. She has marks on her arm that she tries to hide with her shirt." Benedict's heart raced. The situation was much worse than he had imagined. It wasn't just a mean stepfather, but a violent man terrorizing an entire family. "Isadora, listen to me closely," he said, turning to face her. "Tomorrow morning, when you go back home, I want you to tell your mother that I'd like to talk to her. You can tell her it's about work on the farm." Isadora's eyes lit up with cautious hope. "Real work?" "Real work," Benedict confirmed, "and I want you to know one thing. No one will hurt you while I'm around. Understand?" Isadora nodded, but in her eyes there was a sad wisdom, as if she had heard similar promises before and learned not to trust them completely. They sat in silence as the sun fully set. Benedict watched the girl beside him, noticing how she remained. Alert even when relaxed, always ready to flee or defend herself. It was heartbreaking to see so much tension in someone so small. When the stars began to appear in the sky, Isadora yawned, but soon forced herself to stay awake. "You can sleep," Benedict said. "I'll stay awake and watch over you." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Isadora curled up on the porch step, using her own arm as a pillow. In a few minutes she was deeply asleep, but even in her sleep, her body remained tense, as if prepared to wake up and run at any moment. Benedict watched her sleep and made a decision that would change his life forever. No matter what it took, no matter how much it cost, he would not allow that child to continue living in terror. But as he looked at Isadora's peaceful face in sleep, a disturbing question hammered in his mind. How far was Walter Jenkins willing to go to maintain control over his family? The sun was still rising when Benedict was awakened by a gentle movement beside him. He had fallen asleep, leaning against the porch pillar, and Isadora was already standing, smoothing her wrinkled dress with her small hands. "Good morning, Uncle," she said, her voice low so as not to wake him abruptly. "I think I need to leave before Walter wakes up and comes looking for me." Benedict got up, feeling his joints ache after a night sleeping on the wooden floor. "Wait a moment, I'll walk you close to home." "You don't have to," Isadora said quickly, a flicker of fear passing through her eyes. "If he sees you with me again, he'll be very angry. Then I'll stay far enough away so he doesn't see me, but close enough to make sure you get home safely." During the walk along the still, cool morning road, Isadora told him more about her life. Benedict discovered that she was extremely intelligent, asking questions about everything she saw along the way and showing a natural curiosity that impressed him. She knew how to count to 100, recognized some letters, and had an impressive memory for details. "Mom always says that when I grow up, I'll be able to work in a beautiful store, one of those in the big city," Isadora said, kicking a stone ahead. "But for that, I need to learn to read properly. And why don't you go to school?" Isadora's face saddened. "Walter says school is a waste of time for poor girls, that it's better for me to learn to work soon, to help around the house." Benedict felt that familiar anger growing in his chest again. How could anyone deny education to such a clearly brilliant child? They stopped a few houses away from where Isadora lived. It was a simple brick building with a small backyard enclosed by a barbed wire fence. Benedict noticed there were other similar houses on the same street, all looking like they were inhabited by low-income families. "Do you remember what I said yesterday?" he asked. "About talking to your mother?" Isadora nodded. "I'll talk to her, yes, but what if she's scared? Then you tell her I understand her fear, but that maybe we can help each other." The girl smiled for the first time since they met, a smile that completely transformed her face. revealing a delicate beauty behind all that dirt and sadness. "Thank you for everything, Uncle Benedict." She pronounced his name carefully, as if it was something precious. Benedict felt something tighten in his chest upon hearing her. "You're welcome, little one. And remember, you are much smarter and braver than you think." Isadora waved and ran towards home. Benedict waited until he saw her enter through the back of the property before returning to the farm. The day passed slowly. Benedict tried to focus on the inheritance documents, but his thoughts constantly returned to Isadora. Around midday, he decided to go into town for lunch and discreetly observe the surroundings of the house where she lived. At Mrs. Davis's small diner, the only option for home-cooked food in town, he watched the movement on the main street. Harmony Creek was a typical small town in South Carolina, with dirt roads, simple houses, and people who had known each other for generations. The heat was intense, and most residents sought refuge in the shade during the hottest hours of the day. That's when he saw Clara for the first time. She was walking down the street carrying a cloth bag and a broom, clearly returning from some cleaning job. She was a young woman, appearing to be the 28 years Isadora had mentioned, but her tired face and hunched shoulders made her seem older. She wore a long-sleeved shirt despite the scorching heat, and Benedict immediately understood why. Even from a distance, the resemblance between mother and daughter was striking. The same brown eyes, the same delicate facial structure. But where Isadora maintained a sparkle of determination in her gaze, Clara seemed to carry only exhaustion and resignation. Benedict paid his bill and left the diner, but kept a safe distance as he watched Clara enter her house. A few minutes later, he heard screams coming from inside the residence. Walter's harsh voice echoed down the street, swearing and making threats that Benedict couldn't fully understand. He had to make a huge effort not to run over and intervene, but he knew that would only make the situation worse for Clara and Isadora. He needed to be smarter, more strategic. He returned to the farm in the late afternoon, when the sun began to ease the heat. He was organizing some documents on the porch when he heard footsteps on the dirt road. To his surprise, he saw two figures approaching, Isadora and a little behind her, a woman he recognized as Clara. "Uncle Benedict," Isadora called, running ahead. "Mom came to talk to you." Clara approached hesitantly, her hands trembling slightly. She wore the same long-sleeved shirt from the morning, and Benedict could more clearly see the purple marks she was trying to hide on her neck. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice low and respectful. "Isadora said that you might have work for me." "Good afternoon, Clara. Please sit down," Benedict said, indicating the porch steps. "Isadora, why don't you go play near the pecan trees while I talk to your mother?" The girl obeyed, but Benedict noticed she positioned herself where she could hear the conversation. "Clara, I'm going to be direct with you," Benedict began. "Yesterday, I met your daughter under concerning circumstances. She was running from Walter, scared, saying he had threatened to harm her." Clara's face paled, and she instinctively pulled down her shirt sleeves. "Mr. Thompson, Walter sometimes gets upset, but he wouldn't really harm Isadora. Clara," Benedict interrupted gently, "you don't need to defend him to me. From what I see on your neck, on your arm, he has harmed you many times." Tears began to stream down Clara's face. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with stifled sobs. "It's not that simple," she whispered. "You don't understand. Walter knows dangerous people. He always says that if I try to run away, he'll find us. And the next time, it won't just be me who suffers." "What kind of dangerous people?" Clara looked around, as if afraid someone might be listening. "When we arrived here from Charleston, we owed a lot of money. Walter said he knew people who could help us, who would give me work and a place to live. But after we arrived, he Said the help came with a price, that I'd have to give him part of my salary every month to pay off the debt. How much do you earn, and how much do you have to give him? I earn $200 cleaning houses. I give him $150. Benedict felt a cold rage spread through his chest. And you have $50 left for you and Isadora to live on for the entire month? Clara nodded, tears still flowing. Sometimes he lets me keep a little more when he's in a good mood, but most of the time. And the other families on the street, are they going through the same situation? I think so. Everyone came here fleeing something, looking for a fresh start. And Walter is always there to help. But once you accept his help, it's hard to get out, Benedict completed. Clara looked up, revealing red and swollen eyes, but for the first time with a glimmer of hope. You said you had work for me? I do. I need someone to take care of the farm, clean, cook, and there's a small house in the back of the property that needs some repairs, but it would be perfect for you and Isadora to live in. Clara's eyes widened. Are you serious? Completely serious. I'd pay $300 a month plus housing and food. For the first time since she arrived, Clara smiled, but the smile quickly vanished, replaced by an expression of fear. Walter will never allow it. He always says we're his property, that he invested in us and needs to get his return. What if there was a way to convince him? Clara shook her head sadly. There's no way to convince Walter, Mr. Thompson. He's different from other men. He enjoys controlling, seeing people afraid of him. At that moment, Isadora ran back to them, her face lit up by the possibility of a new life. Mom, can we live here? Can we really? Clara hugged her daughter, but her eyes met Benedict's with an expression of desperation. I don't know, my child. I don't know if we can. Benedict watched mother and daughter embracing, two people clearly desperate for a chance to start over, but trapped by fear and manipulation. A fierce determination formed in his chest. For a long time, he hadn't felt truly needed, truly useful, and now he had two people who needed him as much as he, secretly, needed them. Clara, he said, his voice firm and decisive, let me try to resolve this with Walter, but I need you to trust me. Clara looked into Benedict's eyes for a long moment, as if trying to gauge his character. What if it goes wrong? What if he gets even more violent? It won't go wrong, Benedict said, a confidence he didn't know he possessed coloring his voice. I promise. But even as he made that promise, a dark question echoed in his mind. What exactly was he preparing to face? The next morning, Benedict woke early with a plan formed in his mind. He put on his best dress shirt and drove to Harmony Creek's town center, determined to find Walter and resolve the situation once and for all. But first, he stopped at Mr. Anderson's general store to get more information. Mr. Anderson, he said after buying some basic items, yesterday you mentioned that Walter messes with bad people. Can you give me more details? The shopkeeper looked around nervously before replying. Look, Benedict, you seem like a good person, so I'll tell you. Walter doesn't work alone. He has a set-up with Jefferson, the owner of the corner bar, and with Martin, who owns the auto parts store. The three of them control the families who come here fleeing debt or looking for work. What do you mean control? They offer initial help, a place to live, a promise of work, even in advance, but then they charge exorbitant interest. And when people can't pay, they owe them favors. They become almost like slaves. Benedict felt his blood run cold. And no one ever reported this? To whom? The town sheriff is Jefferson's cousin, and the families are too scared to say anything. Most of them are already fleeing problems, so they don't want to draw attention from authorities. Armed with this information, Benedict decided to seek out Walter directly. He found him at Jefferson's bar around midday, drinking beer and playing dominoes with other men from town. The atmosphere was dark and stuffy, with a strong smell of cigarette smoke and alcohol. "Well, look who showed up," Walter said upon seeing him, an ironic smile on his face. "The rich guy who wants to play protector." The other men at the table laughed, but Benedict kept his composure. Years of managing businesses had taught him not to be intimidated by provocations. "I need to talk to you," Benedict said, his voice calm but firm, "in private. Just say it right here in front of everyone. I have no secrets with my friends. It's about Clara and Isadora. I want to hire them to work on my farm." Walter's smile vanished immediately. He stood up from the table, the chair scraping loudly on the concrete floor. "My women are not for sale," he said, his voice low and threatening. "I'm not buying anyone. I'm offering decent work, with fair wages." "Fair work?" Walter laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You don't understand how things work here, rich guy. Clara and the girl owe me. They owe me a lot. I invested time, money, patience in them. I'm not giving up my investment that easily." Benedict took his wallet from his pocket, a movement that made all the men at the table pay attention. "How much do they owe?" "Ah, now you're speaking my language," Walter said, his eyes gleaming with greed. "Let's see. Transportation from Charleston here, a place to live, food, clothes, protection. That's about $5,000. Benedict knew it was an absurdly inflated amount, but he was prepared for it. "I'll pay 6,000. 1,000. Extra for you to forget they exist." The bar fell silent. Walter looked at the other men, clearly trying to maintain his position of authority in front of them. "It's not just about money," he finally said. "It's about principle. Clara came to me asking for help, crying, begging. I gave her a chance when no one else would. Now she's my responsibility." "Your responsibility," Benedict's voice grew harder, "or your property?" Walter's face twisted with rage. "Watch your words, rich guy. You might have money, but I'm the one who runs things here." At that moment, Jefferson, the bar owner, approached the table. He was a large man, with a prominent belly and muscular arms, clearly used to resolving conflicts with physical intimidation. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, resting a heavy hand on Benedict's shoulder. "No problem," Benedict replied, not letting himself be intimidated. "Just a business transaction." "The problem," Walter said, "is that this guy thinks he can just show up here and buy what's not for sale." $6,000 is a lot of money, one of the men at the table commented. "Enough to start a new business." Walter shot a furious look at the man who had spoken. "Nobody asked for your opinion, Frank." Benedict realized he had created a crack in the group. He pressed his advantage. 7,000, he said. "Final offer. And you never approach them again." The silence in the bar was palpable. Walter stared fixedly at Benedict, clearly torn between greed for the money and the desire to maintain control over his victims. "I need to think," he finally said. "You have until tomorrow," Benedict replied, putting his wallet away. "After that, the offer's off the table." He turned to leave, but Walter's voice stopped him. "Rich guy, you have no idea what you're getting into. Clara and the girl, they're not just two more people. They're part of a bigger system. Messing with them means messing with me. And messing with me means messing with people you don't want. As enemies." Benedict slowly turned around. "Is that a threat?" "It's a friendly warning," Walter said, smiling that cynical smile again. "Sometimes trying to save someone just makes things worse for everyone." Benedict left the bar with his heart racing, but determined. He knew he had started something that could have dangerous consequences, but he could no longer pretend not. To see Clara and Isadora's suffering. On the way back to the farm, he stopped at the house where they lived. Clara was in the backyard, hanging clothes on the line, while Isadora played with pebbles in the shade of a scrawny tree. "How did it go?" Clara asked anxiously as he approached the fence. "It's not resolved yet," Benedict admitted, "but I offered him money, a lot of money. I think he'll accept." Clara's eyes filled with hopeful tears. "Is it possible? Will we finally be able to get out of this situation?" "It'll be all right," Isadora said, running to the fence. "Uncle Benedict is strong. He's not afraid of Walter." Benedict smiled at the girl, but a worry grew in his chest. Walter's words about a bigger system deeply bothered him. What exactly had he discovered? And more importantly, what would happen if Walter decided not to accept the money? That night, alone on the farm, Benedict couldn't sleep. He stayed on the porch, watching the stars and thinking about the life he had led for the past 5 years. After Margaret's death, he had emotionally shut down, dedicating himself only to business, maintaining superficial relationships, avoiding any situation that could cause emotional pain. But now, in just a few days, 2 people had entered his life and awakened feelings he thought he had buried with his wife. Clara, with her fragility and quiet strength, reminded him what it was like to care for someone, to protect someone. And Isadora, with her precocious intelligence and courage in the face of suffering, touched a part of his heart that had been dormant for a long time. For the first time since Margaret's death, Benedict felt truly alive. But he also knew he was walking into dangerous territory. Walter wasn't just a common violent man. He was part of something bigger, more organized, more dangerous. When he finally managed to fall asleep, it was past 3 in the morning. His dreams were disturbed by images of Isadora running scared, of Clara crying, and a persistent feeling that something terrible was about to happen. He woke to the sound of footsteps on the porch. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. He quickly got up and opened the door, finding Isadora standing there, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "Uncle Benedict," she whispered, trembling. "You need to come quick. Walter took Mom. He said if you want to see her again, you have to go to the abandoned house on the edge of town, alone." Benedict's blood ran cold. He looked at the frightened girl in front of him and realized the game had completely changed. This was no longer a simple negotiation. Walter had decided to escalate the conflict to an entirely different level. Benedict quickly put on jeans and a t-shirt, his heart pounding. Isadora remained on the porch, hugging her arms, trembling despite the heat already starting to build even in the early morning. "Isadora, tell me exactly what happened," he said, kneeling in front of the girl to be at her eye level. "I woke up with Mom screaming," she began, her voice choked with sobs. "Walter was very angry, saying you had humiliated him in front of his friends. He hit her, Uncle Benedict, hit her hard, and then he said she would pay for what you did." "How did you manage to get out of the house?" "I hid under the bed when the commotion started. When they left, I ran here. It took me almost an hour walking in the dark." Benedict looked at Isadora's bare, bruised feet, imagining the courage it took for a 6-year-old to walk alone on deserted roads during the night. "You were very brave," he said, gently touching the girl's face. "Now I need you to be brave a little longer. I'm going to get your mother, but you need to stay here, hidden. If anyone comes looking for you, hide among the pecan trees and don't come out until I return." "What if you don't come back?" Isadora asked, her large eyes reflecting a fear no child should ever feel. Benedict hesitated. He couldn't make promises he might not be able to keep, but he also couldn't leave the girl completely without hope. "I'll be back," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "But if by chance it takes a long time, you go to Mr. Anderson's general store and ask for help. He's a good person." Isadora nodded, wiping tears with the back of her hands. "Will you bring Mom back?" "I will," Benedict promised, praying he could keep that promise. He got into his truck and drove towards the abandoned house Isadora had mentioned. He knew the place, an old residence on the outskirts of Harmony Creek that had belonged to a family who had moved to the capital years ago. The property was isolated, surrounded by dense vegetation, perfect for someone who wanted to keep prisoners away from curious eyes. During the drive, Benedict tried to formulate a plan. He had no experience with kidnapping situations, but he knew Walter expected him to arrive desperate and willing to make any deal. He decided to take all the cash he had with him, about $10,000 in cash that he kept at the farm, and try to resolve everything through negotiation. The abandoned house appeared at the end of a bumpy dirt road. It was an old brick building with a partially collapsed roof and windowless frames. The surrounding vegetation had grown wild, creating a somber and threatening atmosphere. Benedict parked his truck and walked to the front door, which was ajar. Before he even entered, he heard voices from inside. "He'll show up," Walter was saying. "The rich guy fell for my woman. He'll do anything to get her back." "What if he brings the police?" It was Jefferson's voice. "He won't know. He knows if he brings the police, the woman suffers the consequences." Benedict took a deep breath and pushed the door open, entering the house. The interior was even more dismal than the exterior. Broken furniture scattered on the floor, walls with damp stains, the smell of mold and abandonment permeating the air. In the main room, he found Walter, Jefferson, and a third man he recognized as Martin, the auto parts store owner. Clara was sitting in an old chair, her hands tied behind her back, a piece of duct tape over her mouth. Her face was swollen with evident marks of aggression, but her eyes lit up with relief when she saw him. "Right on time," Walter said, smiling. "We were starting to think you didn't care that much about her." "Let her go," Benedict said, keeping his voice firm despite the fear he felt. "Let's resolve this like civilized men." "Civilized?" Jefferson laughed. "You weren't very civilized yesterday, trying to buy what belongs to Walter." "I brought the money," Benedict said, showing a cloth bag. $10,000, much more than you asked for yesterday." The three men's eyes gleamed with greed, but Walter shook his head. "Now it's not just about money, rich guy. You disrespected me in front of my friends. You made me look weak, willing to sell my family for a few bucks." "What do you want then?" Martin, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. He was a short, stout man with tattooed arms and a cruel expression. "We want you to understand how things work here," he said. "Harmony Creek has its rules, and one of those rules is that outsiders don't meddle in locals' business." "What's your proposal?" "Simple," Walter replied. "You take your money, go back to your farm, and forget Clara and the girl exist. In return, we'll leave you alone." "And if I don't accept?" The three men exchanged significant glances. Jefferson pulled a knife from his waistband, a long, sharp blade that glinted in the faint light coming through the broken windows. "Then things get more complicated," he said. Benedict looked at Clara, who was shaking her head desperately, trying to say something through the duct tape. Her eyes pleaded for him to accept the deal and leave, not to risk his life for her. But then Benedict thought of Isadora. He remembered the fear in the girl's eyes, the courage she had shown walking alone in the dark to ask for help. He thought of her intelligence, her dreams of learning to read, the life she could have if someone gave her a chance. "No," he said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "I don't accept." Walter's face contorted with rage. "Are you crazy? There's no way to win this situation, rich guy. It's 3 against 1. We're armed, and we have the woman." "Hostage?" "Maybe," Benedict agreed, "but you're forgetting one thing." "What?" Benedict smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're forgetting that I have something you want more than anything, money. And if anything happens to me, you'll never see a dime of it." There was a moment of tense silence. The three men exchanged glances, clearly torn between greed and the desire for violence. That's when they heard voices from outside the house, many voices approaching. Walter ran to the window and peered through a crack in the wall. His face paled. "How did you do this?" he asked, turning to Benedict with a look of panic. "Did what?" "You brought half the town here." Benedict also looked out the window and was shocked by what he saw. At least 20 people were approaching the house. Men, women, even some children. He recognized some faces. Mr. Anderson from the general store, Mrs. Evans who washed clothes by the river, old Mr. Jenkins who fixed bicycles in the town square. And at the front of everyone, with a determination Benedict had never seen before, walked an elderly woman with white hair, leaning on a carved wooden cane. "Who is that?" Benedict asked. "Grandma Evelyn," Martin replied, his voice trembling. "The oldest midwife in town. If she's here. Walter Jenkins." The woman's voice echoed through the morning, strong and authoritative despite her age. "Get out of there immediately and bring Clara with you." "How did she know?" Jefferson whispered. Benedict began to understand. "Isadora," he murmured. "She didn't stay hidden at the farm. She went to get help." Walter turned to him, his eyes burning with hatred. "Your doomed little girl might have just signed her mother's death warrant." But before he could make any move towards Clara, the house door burst open. Grandma Evelyn entered, leaning on her cane, followed by several men from town. "Drop that!" "Knife, Jefferson," she said, her voice calm but relentless. "And you, Walter, release that woman right now." "Grandma Evelyn, you don't understand the situation," Walter began, trying to regain his air of authority. "I understand perfectly." The woman cut him off. "I understand that you three have been exploiting defenseless families for years, charging abusive debts, keeping people in slavery, and I understand that this ends today." "You can't prove anything," Martin said, but his voice trembled. Grandma Evelyn smiled, a dry, humorless sound that revealed decades of wisdom and experience. "I don't need to prove anything, son, because the whole town already knows what you do, and today everyone decided it's enough." It was then that Benedict noticed something extraordinary. Among the people who had arrived with Grandma Evelyn, there were several families he recognized as victims of Walter's scheme. They were no longer afraid, they were angry. The situation had completely changed, but what would happen now? And where was Isadora? The tension in the abandoned house was palpable. Walter, Jefferson, and Martin exchanged glances, clearly realizing that the situation had completely spiraled out of their control. Outside, more voices joined Grandma Evelyn's group, creating a growing murmur of indignation. "You don't understand," Walter said, trying to maintain his composure, but his voice trembled. "These people owe me money. I invested in them. I gave them opportunities." "Opportunities?" The voice came from the doorway, where a young woman had appeared. Benedict recognized her as one of the residents of the street where Clara lived. "Do you call it an opportunity to force me to hand over half my salary every month? Do you call it an opportunity to threaten my children when I question your abusive interest rates?" "And you, Jefferson," another man continued, pointing at the bar owner. "How many times did you make me work at your bar without pay, saying it was to pay off my debt?" One by one, other residents began to enter the house, each telling their story of exploitation and blackmail. Benedict watched, fascinated, as people who had always lived in silence and fear finally found the courage to speak. It was Grandma Evelyn who finally brought order to the situation. "Enough," she said, striking her cane on the rotten wooden floor. "We didn't come here to take justice into our own hands. We came to get Clara and end this situation once and for all." She approached the chair where Clara was tied, and with movements surprisingly agile for her age, cut the ropes with a small pocket knife she took from her pocket. She carefully removed the duct tape from the woman's mouth. "Thank you," Clara whispered, her voice hoarse. "Thank you all." "Where is Isadora?" Benedict asked, helping Clara to her feet. "She's safe," Grandma Evelyn replied. "I left her at my house with my granddaughter. She was the one who came to me this morning crying, saying you had gone to face these men alone. A 6-year-old taught all of us adults a lesson in courage." Walter took a step forward, desperation evident in his eyes. You can't do this to me. I have rights. These people signed contracts. Contracts. Grandma Evelyn laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Contracts that exploit the misery of others are not worth the paper they're written on. Besides, Mr. Anderson added, we've already notified the authorities in Charleston. They're on their way to investigate your scheme. Walter's, Jefferson's, and Martin's faces paled further. Benedict realized the situation had completely changed. From a kidnapping, negotiation, to a confrontation between the entire community and its oppressors. What do you want? Martin asked, his former arrogance replaced by palpable fear. We want you out of our town, Grandma Evelyn said simply. Today, and never come back. What about the debts? Jefferson tried to argue. What debts? Replied one of the women who had been exploited. Debts created with impossible interest, collected with threats and violence. Those debts no longer exist. Benedict watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and relief. Those simple people, whom he had underestimated, were demonstrating impressive collective strength. It wasn't revenge they sought, but justice. Clara, he said softly, are you okay? She nodded, delicately touching her swollen face. I am, and for the first time in a long time I'm not afraid. We are all fearless, Grandma Evelyn added. That's what happens when people unite against oppression. Walter made one last desperate attempt. Do you think this will change anything? There are others like us, in other towns. Families like Clara's will always need protection. Maybe, Grandma Evelyn replied calmly. But here in Harmony Creek, you no longer have a place. Defeated, the three men began to head for the door, but Walter stopped and turned to Benedict one last time. You think you saved everyone, rich guy. But raising a family isn't just about getting people out of a bad situation. You have to take care of them forever. Are you ready for that? Benedict looked at Clara, then at the people around him, and finally found his answer. I am, he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his own voice. After the three men left, the crowd gradually dispersed. Grandma Evelyn approached Benedict and Clara. Come, she said. Let's get Isadora. She must be eager to know you're all right. During the walk to Grandma Evelyn's house, Clara walked beside. Benedict, still processing everything that had happened. Why did you do this? She asked. Why did you risk your life for us? Benedict thought about the question for a moment before answering. Because for the past 5 years, since I lost my wife, I've shut myself off from the world. I stopped feeling, I stopped genuinely caring about anyone. You two reminded me what it's like to truly be alive. And now? What happens to us? Now, you come with me to the farm. Clara, you'll take care of the house. Isadora will learn to read and write, and we'll all learn to be a family. Louis. When they arrived at Grandma Evelyn's house, they found Isadora sitting on the porch, drawing on a piece of paper with a colored pencil. Upon seeing them, she dropped everything and ran to hug her mother first, then Benedict. I knew you'd be okay, she said, her words muffled by the embrace. Grandma Evelyn said that when people come together to do good, bad things can't win. She's right, Benedict said, kneeling to be at the girl's height. And you know what else? You were the bravest person of all of us today. Isadora smiled, that luminous smile that completely transformed her face. Uncle Benedict, can I show you something? She ran to where she had left the paper and came back with it in her hands. It was a simple drawing, made with colored pencils, showing 3 figures holding hands in front of a big house. That's us, she explained, our new family. 6 months later, the pecan farm had been completely transformed. Benedict had not only renovated the main house, but also built a small school on the property, where Isadora and other children from the region learned to read and write. Clara, who discovered a natural talent for organization, had become the coordinator of a project that helped other vulnerable families restart their lives. They worked together with Grandma Evelyn and other residents to create a support network that prevented new exploiters from settling in town. Isadora, now literate, kept a notebook where she wrote her own stories. Stories about courage, about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, about how love can transform not only individual lives, but entire communities. On a warm Sunday afternoon, the three of them sat on the renovated porch of the farm, watching the children play among the pecan trees that now grew healthy and organized. "Uncle Benedict," Isadora said, closing her story notebook, "do you think Walter was right when he said that raising a family is hard?" Benedict looked at her, then at Clara, who smiled as she sewed clothes to donate to needy families. "He was right about one thing," Benedict replied. "Raising a family is forever." But he forgot to mention the most important part. "What part?" "That when you truly love someone, taking care of them forever isn't a burden. It's a privilege." Isadora nodded thoughtfully, then opened her notebook again. "I'll write that in my story," she said, "so other people know it's worth never giving up on the people you love." And so, as the sun set over Harmony Creek, painting the sky in shades of orange, a family built not by blood but by love and choice continued to write its own story of transformation and hope.